The violent shudder of the transport ship jolted Everett awake. Emergency lights flashed crimson across the medical bay, casting eerie shadows that danced along the sterile walls. Outside the viewport, violet plasma storms raged across the barren surface of Cryos, their tendrils reaching skyward like the grasping fingers of some cosmic deity. It had been 3 standard years since the end of the Titan War, but for Everett, a field medic of the Third Colonial Alliance, peace remained as elusive as the plasma-free corridors of space. "Status report," he demanded, his voice competing with the wailing alarms. The ship's AI remained stubbornly silent. The last thing Everett remembered was preparing medical supplies for the outpost inspection on Cryos's northern hemisphere. Captain Torres had been piloting, her steady hands guiding them through what should have been a routine atmospheric entry. Now, the captain was nowhere to be seen, and judging by the angle of the deck beneath his feet, they weren't flying anymore. Everett winced as he pushed himself upright, feeling the warm trickle of blood from a gash above his right eye. The medical scanner at his wrist indicated minor lacerations, a concussion, and 2 cracked ribs, survivable, but far from comfortable. Whatever had struck their ship had done so with devastating precision. "Torres!" he called out, navigating through the twisted metal that had once been the ship's corridor. "Captain Torres!" The only response was the creaking of the hull and the distant howl of Cryos's alien winds. The cockpit, when he finally reached it, told the rest of the story. The reinforced viewport had shattered inward, and the captain's seat was empty, save for a torn fragment of the standard-issue flight suit. The atmospheric readings on his wrist scanner spiked, breathable, but laden with particulates that would cause respiratory issues within hours. Something had ripped open the cockpit mid-flight and taken Torres with it. Survival protocols flooded Everett's mind. Secure the area, assess damages, establish communication, treat injuries. The training was automatic, a framework that kept panic at bay. The ship's emergency beacon was intact, but the communication array was a melted mass of circuitry. Help would come eventually. Alliance protocol dictated a search and rescue mission for any downed medical transport, but eventually could mean days on a frontier planet like Cryos. Everett was gathering survival supplies from what remained of the cargo hold when he heard it, a low, guttural sound that seemed to reverberate through the ship's fractured skeleton. It wasn't mechanical. It was alive. Following the sound led him to a section of the hull that had peeled back like the skin of some exotic fruit. Beyond it lay not the purple-hazed landscape of Cryos, but a cavernous space that couldn't possibly be part of the original ship. The floor sloped downward into darkness, and the walls gleamed with a crystalline sheen that refracted the emergency lights into 1,000 crimson stars. The sound came again, closer now, a pained keening that raised the hairs on the back of Everett's neck. His medical scanner pulsed with proximity alerts. Large life form, unknown classification, severe distress signatures, whatever it was dying. Every instinct honed by years on the battlefield told Everett to retreat, to secure the ship's perimeter and wait for extraction. But another, deeper instinct, the one that had driven him to become a medic in the first place, pushed him forward. The creature lay sprawled across what appeared to be a throne of crystalline material, its massive form heaving with labored breaths. In the dim light, Everett could make out a silhouette that defied easy classification. Part reptilian, part mammalian, with an exoskeleton that gleamed like burnished copper. 6 limbs, 2 of which ended in appendages that might charitably be called hands, splayed at awkward angles. A wound on its flank pulsed with fluid that shimmered with an iridescent blue-green hue. Not blood as Everett knew it, but something else entirely. His scanner whirred frantically, attempting to categorize the creature's physiology. The readout flickered between incompatible analyses before settling on Vorik-class entity, Imperial designation, warning, protected species, interference prohibited by Interstellar Statute 459b. Everett had heard of Voraks, the so-called Empress beasts of the Korean Empire, semi-sentient creatures genetically bonded to the Korean ruling class, symbols of power and extensions of imperial will. What he hadn't heard was that they could be injured, or that one would be found thousands of light years from the nearest Korean territory. The Vorak's eyes, all 8 of them, arranged in a corona around what might be its head, swiveled toward Everett. Intelligence burned there, along with pain and something that might have been fear. "I'm a medic," Everett said slowly, knowing the creature couldn't understand his words, but hoping his tone might convey peaceful intent. "I can help." The Vorak made a clicking sound, its exoskeletal plates shifting to reveal more of the wound. It was no accident. The creature was deliberately showing Everett the injury. Whether this indicated trust or desperation, he couldn't tell. The wound itself presented a mystery. The edges were clean, suggesting a weapon rather than traumatic impact. But the surrounding tissue showed signs of necrosis, spreading outward in a pattern Everett had seen only in chemical attacks. Someone had poisoned the creature with a toxin designed specifically for its unique physiology. Everett's medical kit was designed for human anatomy, or at least the carbon-based variations that comprise the Alliance's member species. The Vorak was something else entirely, its copper-based blood and crystalline cellular structure making it as alien as anything he'd encountered. But principles of trauma care remained universal. Stop the bleeding, remove foreign substances, stabilize vital functions. He could work with that. As he approached, the Vorak made no move to attack. Instead, it lowered what appeared to be its primary sensory cluster, a gesture that struck Everett as almost deferential. "I'm going to help you," Everett repeated, unsure whether he was reassuring the creature or himself. "But you need to stay still." His scanner showed the toxin spreading through the Vorak's system, its molecular structure breaking down cell walls and corrupting the creature's equivalent of a circulatory system. Without intervention, death would come within hours. Everett had just begun sterilizing the area around the wound when the air behind him shimmered, like heat rising from desert sands. He turned, medical injector in hand, to find himself face to face with a contingent of armored figures that had most definitely not been there seconds before. Their armor gleamed with the same coppery sheen as the Vorak's exoskeleton, and their helmets concealed any features that might have revealed their species. Each carried a weapon that hummed with barely contained energy, weapons currently pointed directly at Everett's chest. From their midst stepped a figure whose armor differed from the others, more ornate, adorned with crystalline inlays that caught the light and refracted it in hypnotic patterns. This figure removed its helmet to reveal features that were almost, but not quite, human. Alabaster skin with faint, iridescent undertones, eyes of such a deep violet they appeared black in the dim light, and a crown of what might have been hair, but moved with too much deliberate purpose, like tentacles sensing the air. "You will explain," the figure said, voice melodic yet threaded with steel. "Why you have your hands on my Vorak." The language was standard colonial, but spoken with an accent that tugged at the vowels, stretching them into shapes that shouldn't have been possible with a humanoid vocal apparatus. Everett lowered the injector slowly. "I'm a medic with the 3rd Colonial Alliance. My transport crashed. I found this creature, your Vorak, wounded. I was attempting to provide medical assistance." The figure's eyes narrowed, the tentacle hair writhing with increased agitation. "The Vorak is not merely a creature. It is Kiranvor, the Empress beast, bonded to the royal bloodline for 17 generations. Its life and mine are genetically intertwined." She, for the voice and form suggested feminine attributes by human standards, stepped closer, her guards moving in perfect synchronicity. "I am Empress Korra of the 7th Korean dynasty, and you will tell me what you have done to my beast." Everett's mind raced. The Korean Empire was known to Alliance worlds primarily through intelligence briefings and diplomatic warnings. A matriarchal society with technology centuries beyond human development. They had remained isolated from galactic affairs since a brief, devastating conflict with the Proxima Collective a century earlier. Rumor held that their warships could reduce a planet to molten slag within hours, and that their Empress commanded loyalty through a combination of genetic manipulation and ritual combat that left few challengers to her rule. And here she was, apparently on Cryos, demanding answers about her dying beast. "I've done nothing to harm it," Everett said, careful to keep his voice steady. "Based on my preliminary analysis, the Vorak has been poisoned, a toxin designed to target its specific genetic makeup. The wound is merely the delivery system." Cora's eyes flicked to the Vorak, which made a series of clicks and whistles that clearly conveyed meaning to her. Her expression hardened. "Vex," she spat, the name sounding like a curse. "My sister grows bold in her treachery." One of the guards stepped forward, helmet removed to reveal features similar to Cora's, but harder, angles where the Empress had curves. "The human could be Vex's agent. Your radiance. The timing is too convenient." Cora studied Everett with an intensity that made him feel as though she were cataloging his cellular structure. "No, Commander Zephyr. This one lacks the guile for such deception. His concern for Kirinvor is genuine, if misguided." She turned back to Everett. "You claim to be a medic. Can you undo what has been done to my beast?" Everett looked at the Vorak, Kirinvor, its condition deteriorating by the minute. "I can try, but I'll need to understand more about its physiology, and I'll need proper medical equipment. My supplies are limited to what survived the crash." Cora made a gesture, and one of the guards produced a crystalline device that hovered at eye level. "This contains the Vorak's genetic blueprint and physiological parameters. It is more than any non-Kriean has ever been permitted to access." Her voice lowered, became dangerous. "Should you use this knowledge for any purpose other than healing Kirinvor, your death will extend across generations of your line." The threat was clear, but so was the desperation beneath it. Whatever bond existed between Empress and Beast, it went beyond mere ownership or even companionship. "I understand," Everett said, accepting the device. "I'll need a sterile environment and assistance with translation of any technical terms specific to Kriean biology." Cora nodded. "Commander Zephyr will remain with you. The rest of us will secure the perimeter against further attacks." As the Empress and her guards moved with silent efficiency to establish a defensive position around the crashed ship, Everett turned his attention to the floating crystal. Touching its surface activated a holographic display of the Vorak's internal systems, a complex network of organs that defied terrestrial classification, connected by channels that pulsed with copper-based fluid. Commander Zephyr watched impassively as Everett studied the display. "The Empress has placed extraordinary trust in you, human. Few outsiders have ever seen a Vorak, let alone touched one." "Why is that?" Everett asked, identifying what appeared to be the creature's filtration organs, the equivalent of kidneys, but with a crystalline structure that suggested they processed energy as well as waste. "The Vorak bond is the foundation of Kriean rule," Zephyr said, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "Each Empress bonds with a single Vorak upon ascending to the throne. Their genetic codes intertwine, creating a symbiotic relationship that enhances both. The Empress gains extended life and heightened senses. The Vorak gains intelligence and purpose beyond its wild nature." Everett noted how the toxin was targeting the specific genetic markers that must have been introduced during this bonding process. "And if the Vorak dies?" Zephyr's expression remained neutral, but a subtle shift in posture betrayed tension. "The Empress would survive, but weakened. More importantly, it would be seen as an omen, a sign that her reign is ending. In our history, no Empress has long outlived her Vorak." The political implications were clear. If Cora's sister, Vex, had poisoned the beast, it was a calculated move to destabilize the Empress's rule without the messiness of direct assassination. The crystal display showed the toxin's progress, slower now, but still advancing. Everett recognized the chemical structure as similar to heavy metal poisoning in humans, where toxic elements bound to cellular receptors, preventing normal function. "I think I can help," he said finally. "The toxin works by binding to specific receptor sites in the Vorax cells. If we can introduce a chelating agent, something that binds more strongly to the toxin than to the cells, we might be able to flush it from the system." "And where would you obtain such an agent?" Zephyr asked, skepticism evident. Everett accessed his medical database through his wrist unit. "I can synthesize something from my supplies and whatever local compounds you might have available. It won't be perfect, but it could buy us time." Before Zephyr could respond, a low rumble shook the ground, followed by the distinctive whine of energy weapons discharging outside. The commander's hand went to her weapon, and she barked something in the Korean language into a communicator at her wrist. The response came not through the communicator, but from Empress Cora herself, who strode back into the chamber with fury etched across her features. "Vex's forces have found us," she announced. "They've established a perimeter and are demanding our surrender." Everett looked up from the crystal display. "We can't move Kirin Vor in this condition. The toxin has weakened its cellular structure. Any significant movement could accelerate the damage." Cora's gaze shifted between the medic and her beast. "Then we hold our position. Zephyr, deploy defensive countermeasures. I want a shield around this structure within 2 minutes." As the commander hurried to comply, Cora turned to Everett. "You have less time than you thought, human medic. My sister will not wait patiently while you experiment." "I need to synthesize the chelating agent," Everett said, already moving to his scattered medical supplies. "And I'll need access to whatever cryon medical technology you have available." Cora made a gesture, and a section of the crystalline wall slid open to reveal a compartment filled with devices Everett couldn't begin to identify. "These are from my personal shuttle's medical bay. Will they suffice?" Everett examined the alien technology with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Most of it was far beyond his training, but certain principles of medical science were universal. "I think so, but I'll need your help to operate them." As Cora began explaining the function of each device, another explosion rocked the structure, closer this time. The Empress didn't flinch. "My sister grows impatient," she observed coolly, a trait that has always clouded her judgment. Everett selected what appeared to be a molecular synthesizer, its controls responding to Cora's touch with a soft glow. "You mentioned a genetic bond with Kirin Vor. Does that mean you can feel what it feels?" A shadow passed over Cora's features. "Yes, its pain is considerable, as is its fear." She met Everett's eyes directly. "It knows it is dying, medic, and it knows what that means for me, for our dynasty." The vulnerability in her admission struck Everett as profoundly un-Empress-like. "Then let's make sure that doesn't happen." Working together, they programmed the synthesizer to create a compound that would, theoretically, bind to the toxin molecules without further damaging the Vorax cellular structure. The process required multiple attempts, each failure forcing them to recalibrate based on the beast's unique biochemistry. Outside, the sounds of conflict intensified. Commander Zephyr reported through the communication system that Vex's forces were probing the defenses, looking for weaknesses. "We cannot hold indefinitely, Your Radiance," Zephyr's voice crackled. "Our shields are designed for space combat, not sustained ground assault." Cora's response was cut short by a notification from the synthesizer. The latest compound was ready. Everett examined it through his scanner. The molecular structure complex but stable. "This might work," he said, loading the compound into an injector designed for the Vorax thick hide. "But I can't guarantee there won't be side effects. Its system is already compromised. Cora moved to Kiranvor's side, placing a hand on its armored flank. Proceed. Everett administered the compound directly into what his scans indicated was the primary circulatory node. For several tense moments, nothing happened. Then, Kiranvor's entire body convulsed, a keening cry escaping what might have been its mouth. Cora gasped, doubling over as if struck. "What have you done?" Everett checked his scanner frantically. "The compound is working. It's binding to the toxin, but the process is creating a systemic inflammatory response." He adjusted settings on his medical unit. "I need to counteract the inflammation before it causes more damage than the toxin." Before he could administer a second compound, the wall nearest them exploded inward, showering them with crystalline fragments. Through the smoke and debris stepped figures in armor, similar to Cora's guards, but accented with crimson rather than gold. At their center stood a woman who could only be Vex, her resemblance to Cora unmistakable, though her features were sharper, her tentacle hair shorter and writhing with agitation. Where Cora projected regal authority, Vex radiated barely contained violence. "Sister," Vex said, the word dripping with false affection. "How thoughtful of you to bring your precious beast to such a convenient location." Her gaze shifted to Everett, then back to Cora. "And you found a new pet as well. How charming." Cora straightened, though Everett could see the effort it cost her. "Your toxin was clever, Vex, targeting the bonding markers rather than vital systems, designed to make Kiranvor's death appear natural." Vex smiled, the expression devoid of warmth. "A courtesy I had not planned to extend to you. But circumstances change," she gestured, and her guards raised their weapons. "Surrender now, and your death will be swift. Continue this futile resistance, and I will ensure you feel every moment of Kiranvor's agony as it dies." Everett stepped forward, placing himself between the sisters. "The Vorak doesn't have to die. The toxin can be neutralized." Vex's attention snapped to him, her eyes narrowing. "And who are you to make such claims, human?" "He is a medic," Cora answered before Everett could speak. "One who has shown more honor in the past hour than you have in a lifetime." "Sister," Vex laughed, the sound like shattering glass. "Honor? From a human? Their species still slaughters each other over lines drawn on maps and gods that don't exist." "Nevertheless," Everett said, refusing to be baited, "I've developed a compound that's neutralizing the toxin. If you truly want the throne, Vex, there are less destructive paths than fratricide and the death of an Imperial Vorak." Something flickered in Vex's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or grudging curiosity. "Explain." Everett glanced at his scanner, where the Vorak's vitals showed marginal improvement. "The chelating agent is working, but slowly. The beast's system is fighting both the toxin and the cure. But there's another approach we could try, one that might benefit all Krians, not just the royal line." "What approach?" Cora asked, her voice tight with pain she couldn't fully conceal. "Gene editing," Everett said. "Not just to remove the toxin, but to strengthen the bonding markers against future attacks. It would require samples from both of you, the original royal bloodline and its alternative expression." The implication was clear. Vex's claim to the throne could be legitimized through this process, creating a shared rule rather than a zero-sum game where one sister must fall for the other to rise. Vex's tentacle hair writhed with increased agitation. "A human presumes to rewrite Krian royal genetics? The arrogance is breathtaking." "The arrogance," Cora countered, "is believing you could rule alone, sister. Our dynasty has always drawn strength from duality. The Empress and her Vorak, wisdom and power in balance." She straightened, imperial dignity reasserting itself despite her pain. "Perhaps it is time for a new balance." Everett watched the sisters, aware that he was witnessing a pivotal moment in Krian history, and that his survival depended on its outcome. Vex's forces maintained their positions, weapons trained on Korra's smaller contingent. Commander Zephyr stood ready at the Empress's side, her own weapon aimed at Vex's heart. "A temporary truce," Vex said finally, "until the Vorax fate is determined. But I retain the right to resume hostilities should I suspect deception." Korra nodded once, regally. "Agreed." Everett released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "I'll need access to more advanced medical equipment than what we have here. And I'll need samples from both of you to create a template for the genetic modifications." Vex gestured to one of her guards, who stepped forward and removed her helmet to reveal features that marked her as a medical specialist of some kind. "Physician Kale will assist you and ensure you attempt nothing unauthorized." The next several hours passed in a blur of intense work. Everett, assisted by the Korean physician, utilized technology that would have been considered miraculous on Alliance worlds. The Koreans' understanding of genetic manipulation far exceeded human science. But they had blind spots, particularly regarding interspecies applications. Everett's experience with diverse physiologies from his time as an Alliance medic provided insights the Koreans had never considered. The chelating agent continued its work, binding to the toxin molecules and allowing Kirin Vor's system to flush them out. But the damage to the bonding markers remained, weakening the connection between Empress and Beast. "The gene editing will address that," Everett explained, as they prepared the final sequence. "We're not just removing the toxin, we're strengthening the genetic bridge between Korra and Kirin Vor, making it resistant to similar attacks in the future." Physician Kale studied the proposed genetic modifications with professional curiosity. "And the inclusion of Empress Vex's genetic markers?" Everett had noted the physician's use of the imperial title for both sisters, a diplomatic choice in uncertain political waters. "It creates a triangulated bond, stronger, more resilient, and with benefits for all parties." What he didn't say, what didn't need saying to the politically astute Kreons, was that it also created a situation where neither sister could eliminate the other without endangering the Vorak and, by extension, the legitimacy of Kreon rule. As they worked, Korra remained by Kirin Vor's side, one hand resting on its armored flank. Vex paced the perimeter of the chamber, her guards maintaining a watchful presence while keeping a respectful distance from the medical proceedings. The situation outside had stabilized into an uneasy standoff. Vex's flagship, the dreadnought, Sovereign's Will, maintained position above them, while Korra's forces had established a defensive perimeter centered on the crashed human transport. Both sides awaited the outcome of Everett's intervention. "We're ready," Everett announced finally, holding a vial of luminescent fluid that contained the modified genetic material. "This needs to be administered directly to the primary neural cluster." Korra looked to Physician Kale, who nodded confirmation. "The human's work appears sound. Your radiance. The modifications follow established Kreon principles while incorporating novel approaches." Vex approached, her earlier hostility tempered by scientific curiosity. "What novel approaches?" Everett prepared the injection system. "Human medicine has extensive experience with traumatic injury and hostile environments. We've developed techniques for rapid cellular regeneration and neural pathway protection that complement Kreon genetic science." The unspoken subtext, that humans had developed these techniques through millennia of warfare, hung in the air between them. "Proceed," Korra commanded, her voice betraying only the slightest tremor. Everett positioned the injector at the base of what served as Kirin Vor's skull, where the scans showed the highest concentration of neural tissue. "This will cause discomfort, for both of you," he warned, glancing at Korra. "The genetic realignment triggers a cascade effect through the bonded systems." Korra straightened, imperial to her core. "We endure." The injection took less than 3 seconds. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Kirin Vor's entire body went rigid. a sound unlike anything Everett had heard before, part roar, part harmonic resonance, erupting from its core. Cora fell to her knees, her tentacle hair flaring outward as if struck by lightning. Even Vex staggered, caught in the periphery of the effect. For one terrible moment, Everett feared he had killed them all. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the reaction stabilized. Kiranvor's body relaxed, its breathing evening out. Cora rose slowly, her movements more fluid, more assured than before. "The bond," she whispered, wonder replacing pain in her voice. "It's expanded, clearer." Vex approached cautiously, her own tentacle hair responding to some stimulus only she could perceive. "I feel it too. A connection, faint but undeniable." Everett checked his scanner, confirming what their reaction suggested. The modified genetic markers are taking hold, the toxin signatures are diminishing, and the bonding pathways are strengthening. It's working. Over the next hour, the improvement in Kiranvor's condition became undeniable. The wound on its flank began to close, the surrounding tissue regenerating at a rate that would have been impossible in terrestrial organisms. Its movements became more coordinated, its interaction with Cora more nuanced. And something else happened. Something Everett hadn't predicted, but perhaps should have. The sisters, connected now through their shared bond with the Vorak, found their hostility difficult to maintain. It wasn't peace, not yet, but the first step toward understanding. "The implications extend beyond Kiranvor," Physician Kale observed, reviewing the data from their procedure. "This technique could address the degradation we've observed in later generation bonds." Vex looked sharply at the physician. "What degradation? The royal bonds have always been stable." Kale hesitated, glancing at Cora, who nodded permission to continue. "Stable, yes, your radiance, but not optimal. Each generation shows a slight reduction in bond efficacy, imperceptible in isolation, but the cumulative effect over 17 generations is significant." "Why was I not informed of this?" Vex demanded. Cora's expression remained neutral. "Because it was deemed unnecessary to burden you with information that did not directly impact your duties as fleet commander." The underlying message was clear. Some knowledge was reserved for the ruling Empress alone. Vex might have responded with anger, but her attention was drawn to Kiranvor, which had risen to its full height, an impressive 3 meters, and was studying her with its multiple eyes. The beast made a series of clicking sounds, then lowered its primary sensory cluster in what Everett now recognized as a gesture of respect. "It acknowledges you," Cora said softly. "As it acknowledges me, different, but connected." Vex reached out hesitantly, her hand hovering above the Vorak's armored hide. When she finally made contact, a visible shudder passed through both beast and Empress. "A new era," Vex murmured, "requires new approaches." She turned to Everett. "Your intervention has proven valuable, human. The Korean Empire acknowledges this debt. Coming from a species known for their absolute refusal to acknowledge dependency on others. This was tantamount to a Medal of Honor." Cora nodded agreement. "The Third Colonial Alliance will receive formal notification of our gratitude." Her gaze fixed on Everett. "But personal debts require personal settlement." Before Everett could respond, a new alarm sounded, this one from the communication devices of both royal contingents. "Proximity alert," Commander Zephyr reported. "Alliance vessels have entered the system. They appear to be responding to the transport's emergency beacon." Everett felt a surge of relief tinged with unexpected regret. Rescue meant returning to his life in the Alliance, to sterile medical bays and bureaucratic regulations. After what he had experienced here, the raw power of Korean technology, the intensity of their politics, the wonder of working with truly alien biology, that life seemed suddenly pale by comparison. Cora seemed to read his thoughts. You need not return with them. Your radiance. Zephyr's surprise was evident. The human has demonstrated exceptional skill and adaptability, Cora explained, her tone making it clear this was not a point for debate. His insights regarding the Vorak bond could prove valuable to the Empire, and we have established a precedent for interspecies cooperation that would be foolish to abandon. Vex, surprisingly, nodded agreement. The human's techniques merit further study. His presence would facilitate this process. Everett looked between the sisters, aware that he was being offered something unprecedented, a position within the notoriously isolationist Korean Empire. What exactly are you proposing? A role as medical advisor to the imperial household, Cora said, with appropriate accommodations in the capital city of Altir. And, she added, with a glance at Kiran Vor, continued involvement in the Vorak bonding program. The political implications were staggering. A human with access to Korean genetic science could accelerate Alliance medical technology by centuries. Conversely, Korean adoption of human trauma treatment techniques could address vulnerabilities in their otherwise superior physiology. But Everett knew the offer went beyond politics. There was something in Cora's gaze, a personal interest that transcended imperial concerns. And he couldn't deny a reciprocal fascination, not just with Korean science, but with the Empress herself. I would need to inform my superiors, he said carefully, and negotiate terms that respect both Alliance protocols and Korean sovereignty. Cora smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen from her. Diplomacy as well as medicine. You continue to surprise. Everett of Earth. The use of his name, without title or qualification, carried weight in the formal Korean court context. I try to be adaptable, he replied, returning her smile. It's a useful trait in frontier medicine. The moment was interrupted by Commander Zephyr. Alliance vessels are requesting communication. Your Radiance, they are concerned about their missing medic. Cora nodded. Establish a channel. Inform them that their medic is safe and engaged in diplomatic discussions of the highest importance. As Zephyr moved to comply, Vex approached Everett. Be warned, human. Court life is as dangerous as any battlefield. Perhaps more so. Her gaze flicked to her sister. Not all threats come bearing weapons. Everett met her eyes steadily. I'm aware of the risks, your radiance, but I've always believed that the potential for healing outweighs the danger of trying. Vex studied him for a moment longer, then inclined her head in what might have been respect before turning to her sister. I will return to the Sovereign's will to oversee the diplomatic exchange. The fleet awaits your instructions regarding our new arrangement. The words carried layers of meaning, acknowledgement of Cora's continued primacy, while establishing Vex's role in whatever shared governance they were negotiating. Cora nodded regally. Have Chancellor Voss prepare the necessary protocols. We will formalize our agreement once we return to Altir. As Vex and her contingent departed, Cora turned back to Everett. There is much to discuss, Medic, about your role, about the Vorak program, about the future of Korean-human relations. And about us? Everett asked boldly. Cora's tentacle hair rippled in what he was beginning to recognize as amusement. That too, though such discussions traditionally follow rather more formal introduction than battlefield medicine and political crisis. Kiran Vor made a sound that could only be described as a chuckle, its multiple eyes focusing on Everett with what seemed like approval. I've never been one for tradition, Everett admitted. Nor I, Cora said. To the eternal consternation of my court. She gestured toward the opening where her shuttle waited. Come. The Alliance representatives will meet us aboard my flagship. There is much to explain, and little time before we must depart for Altir. As they walked together, Kiran Vor falling into step beside them with a grace that belied its massive size. Everett reflected on the strange path that had led him here. A routine medical inspection transformed into first contact with an empire that had held itself apart from galactic affairs for generations. A crashed transport that had become the site of a political revolution. A dying alien beast that had opened the door to personal and professional possibilities he could never have imagined. "You're thinking very loudly," Cora observed as they boarded her shuttle. Everett smiled. "Just contemplating the unpredictability of life on the frontier." "The unpredictability of life everywhere," she corrected. "Even in the heart of the most ancient empire." As the shuttle rose toward the flagship waiting in orbit, the purple storms of Krios retreated beneath them. Ahead lay Altair, the floating city of the Krian emperors, and a future that promised danger and discovery in equal measure. For a frontier medic who had spent his career patching together the broken pieces of war, the chance to build something new, a bridge between species, a revolution in medical science, perhaps even a personal connection that defied astronomical odds, was irresistible. Kiran Vor rumbled contentedly, seeming to echo Everett's thoughts. The beast was healing. The empire was evolving. And in the space between human pragmatism and Krian tradition, something unprecedented was taking root. Cora's hand brushed his, the contact brief but deliberate. "We arrive at a moment of transformation. Everett of Earth. For my people. For yours. Perhaps for us all." "I look forward to being part of it," he replied, and meant it with every fiber of his being. The stars streaked past the viewport as the shuttle accelerated toward the waiting flagship, and toward whatever future awaited them in the luminous heart of the Krian Empire.